He didn't call NATO. He didn't summon the UN. He didn't even inform the State Department. Instead, Donald Trump personally summoned 5 African presidents to a closed-door meeting in Florida. No cameras, no press, no transcripts, just one message. Choose a side before it's too late. What does Trump know? Why now? And what's at stake for Africa? Let's break it down. Chapter 1. The unexpected invitation. When Trump makes the call, Africa listens. You and I both know that Donald Trump doesn't play by the book. While Joe Biden sends diplomatic envoys and long policy memos, Trump picks up the phone and calls the power players directly. That's exactly what happened in June 2025, when 5 African leaders, those of Senegal, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, and the DRC, received confidential invitations to a private security and trade summit hosted at Mar-a-Lago. But let's be clear, this wasn't about trade. It wasn't about aid either. This was a test, a loyalty test. On the surface, the official line was all about strengthening economic partnerships, exploring defense cooperation, and preparing for future investment opportunities. But behind the glass doors, what really unfolded was one of the most direct ultimatums an American leader has ever given to African heads of state. Sources close to the meeting revealed that Trump was laser-focused on China's growing footprint in Africa, and even more concerned about Russia's rising influence through military deals and private security firms like Wagner. According to someone familiar with the conversation, Trump told the presidents, "You're either with us or you're against us. If you take their money, don't expect ours." That statement landed hard, because these 5 countries aren't small players. Nigeria and Ghana are economic powerhouses. Kenya is a tech hub. Senegal has rising influence in West Africa. And the DRC holds minerals the world literally depends on. Why these 5? Because each of them is currently sitting on the fence. They have welcomed Western funding, yes, but they've also signed infrastructure deals with China, opened the door to Russian paramilitary cooperation, and flirted with BRICS Plus membership. Trump knows this. And unlike Biden's administration, which has tried to play nice with global diplomacy, Trump wants to redraw the battlefield lines before the 2026 US elections. He sees Africa not just as a partner, but as a strategic frontline in the new Cold War. This meeting was his first move. But here's the deeper layer most people are missing. This wasn't just about foreign policy. It was about Trump's return to the White House. Trump is already preparing for 2026 as if it's a global campaign. Africa is no longer a continent to ignore. It's a battleground for narrative control, economic influence, and geopolitical leverage. And if Trump retakes the presidency, he wants allies ready on day one. The 5 presidents left the meeting with more than talking points. They were each handed private policy memos outlining the new American conditions for aid, investment, and military partnerships. And here's the shocking part. All 5 were asked to sign commitment statements, affirming their alignment with U.S. security interests and promising to scale back military cooperation with China and Russia. None of them signed yet. But Trump didn't need signatures. He needed the message to spread. And it has. Since that meeting, diplomatic cables across African capitals have been buzzing. Intelligence circles are reactivating dormant channels. The pressure is building because everyone now understands. Trump is back in the game. And he's not playing softly. And here's the twist. This isn't just a US strategy move. It's forcing African leaders to do something they've avoided for years. Choose sides in a global rivalry that's no longer hiding behind diplomacy. So now you're probably wondering, what exactly is in those secret memos? What did Trump offer, or threaten, to make these leaders sit still for 3 hours in a windowless Florida room? Chapter 2. What Trump really wants, inside the secret memos. So here's where things get serious. When Trump slid those sealed envelopes across the polished Mar-a-Lago table, it wasn't just symbolism. Each memo had a nation's name engraved in gold on the cover: Nigeria, Senegal, Ghana, Kenya, DRC. And each document laid out exactly what Washington, under a potential Trump presidency, expects from its African partners. You have to ask yourself, why the formality? Why this personalized, almost ceremonial delivery? Because this wasn't diplomacy, it was a contract proposal disguised as strategy. And inside those folders? Let me break it down for you. First, the loyalty clause. The memo asked each nation to publicly reaffirm their alignment with U.S. foreign policy objectives, especially in the context of China's Belt and Road Initiative and Russia's paramilitary presence in Africa. That means saying no to future military deals with Moscow. It means canceling upcoming infrastructure bids from Beijing. In some cases, it even means cutting existing contracts early, at a cost. Second, exclusive access to critical minerals. The DRC, in particular, got a version of the memo that focused heavily on cobalt and lithium. Trump's team wants first rights for U.S. tech and energy companies on future extractions. No joint ventures with Chinese entities. No new trade corridors flowing east. The memo frames this as strategic alignment. But make no mistake, it's about securing supply chains for the next generation of AI, batteries, and weapons. Third, military realignment. Ghana and Kenya were given specific instructions to increase interoperability with AFRICOM, the U.S. Africa Command. That means more joint training, more surveillance access, and more American boots rotating in and out of African soil. Not in official bases, but in forward operating agreements, which require no parliamentary approval. Think shadow deployments. Fourth, and most controversial, media and civil society control. Nigeria's memo included an annex proposing American assistance in managing public opinion during electoral cycles. In simple terms, covert influence campaigns. The Trump strategy here is to shape the narrative before elections happen, especially if a leader chooses to side with Washington against BRICS. There's even talk of cyber support packages being offered, tools to monitor dissidents and influencers online under the label of anti-extremism measures. And here's where it gets wild. Each memo came with an expiration date, 6 months. After that, the deals are off the table. This is classic Trump. Offer the world, then impose a countdown clock to crank up the pressure. But what happens if these leaders don't sign? That's when the threat layer kicks in. The memos didn't just outline what they could gain. They spelled out in clear legal language what they risk losing. Suspension of military aid, blocking access to U.S. development financing, visa restrictions for senior officials, even sanctions targeting corrupt procurement systems, code for hitting the elites who benefit most from opaque deals. In private, Trump's advisors are calling this economic leverage warfare. It's subtle, deniable, and brutal. But you know what makes this even more explosive? Some of these leaders are considering it. They're not fools. They know the West is bleeding influence. They know China and Russia don't come without costs either. But they also know that Trump, for all his chaos, delivers results quickly. No endless committee meetings. No vague promises. Just deals and consequences. Since the meeting, internal reports from Ghana's foreign ministry suggest that the president has already begun a quiet audit of Chinese infrastructure projects, looking for legal exit clauses. Meanwhile, Kenyan intelligence has flagged a strategic review of all Russia-linked training programs. But not everyone is ready to jump. In Nigeria, powerful factions inside the military are resisting the shift. They've seen what happened in Mali, in Niger, and Burkina Faso, where Western ties collapsed overnight and new alliances with Moscow were forged in days. They're asking, why put all our eggs back in America's basket, especially under Trump? And then there's the civil society angle. News of the meeting has started leaking, and activist groups across Dakar, Nairobi, and Kinshasa are already warning that Trump's offer sounds less like a partnership and more like neo-imperial control wrapped in American flags. If a leader signs, he might lose the street, even if he gains Washington's wallet. This is the tension tearing through these countries right now. Do you take the Trump deal and secure short-term power? Or do you reject it and risk isolation, sanctions, or worse? You're probably thinking, this all feels familiar. And you're right. It's a playbook that's been used before, Cold War 2.0, but this time the chessboard is African, and the stakes are even higher. In the next chapter, we'll look at how these African leaders are calculating their moves behind closed doors. Who's resisting? Who's about to fold? And what happens if one of them says no to Trump? Chapter 3. The power players. Who's standing, who's wavering. Now here's where the entire game flips. Behind the smiling photos, diplomatic handshakes, and vague press releases, a quiet war is brewing. Not between nations, but inside the palaces, bunkers, and presidential offices of 5 key African countries. The Trump memo didn't just offer power, it exposed pressure points. And each leader is now playing a different kind of chess. Let's start with Nigeria, the most populous country on the continent, the economic engine of West Africa, and home to the region's most complicated elite structure. President Bola Tinubu was the first to receive Trump's envelope, and according to insiders, it rattled the room. Not because of what it said, but because of what it assumed. You see, Nigeria has long walked a tightrope between East and West. American oil companies are embedded in its economy. Chinese construction firms are embedded in its infrastructure. Russian arms deals have crept in through the back door via shadowy intermediaries. Trump's memo didn't ask Nigeria to pick a side, it demanded it. And for the presidency, that's a problem. Inside Abuja, sources tell us a civil-military rift is forming. Some in the armed forces see the Trump proposal as a fast track to tech upgrades and U.S. intelligence. But political advisors warn that breaking from China or Russia could trigger retaliation, trade friction, and even social unrest. Nigeria is not a country that can afford a shock to its fuel imports or digital networks. Several cabinet ministers have already voiced concern, warning that caving to Trump could trigger protests on the streets of Lagos and Abuja. In private, Tinubu's team is drafting what they call a non-alignment clause, a response that tries to appease Trump without closing other doors. But here's the thing, Trump doesn't like nuance. He likes loyalty, and that's why Nigeria could soon face a squeeze. Then there's Senegal. President Diomaye Faye, newly elected and still riding a wave of youthful momentum, was the most reluctant invitee at Trump's table. His campaign was built on independence, anti-corruption, and decolonization rhetoric. But once inside that gold-plated Florida room, he faced a reality his supporters weren't prepared for: strategic dependency. You see, Senegal hosts one of the U.S. military's most important surveillance hubs in West Africa. It's quiet, buried in budget line items, but the Pentagon tracks Sahel movements from their daily. Trump's memo asked for an expansion: more land, better data sharing, and complete secrecy. Faye was reportedly furious. He didn't want Senegal turned into a proxy war zone, especially not while Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are openly rejecting foreign troops. But his finance ministers quietly warned him. Without U.S. backing, a series of development loans and renewable energy partnerships could evaporate. The IMF, already watching Senegal's budget, is less likely to play nice if the U.S. isn't happy. So what does Faye do? He's playing the long game. Instead of outright refusal, he's stalling, demanding more consultations, sending diplomats instead of signing anything. But Trump's clock is ticking, and delays in his world are defiance. Meanwhile, over in Ghana, things are shifting faster than anyone expected. President Nana Akufo-Addo's government, known for its relatively pro-Western tilt, is the most likely to comply with Trump's demands. Ghana has already been coordinating military training with U.S. forces and has signaled willingness to tighten restrictions on Chinese telecom firms. According to leaked internal documents, Ghana is considering a strategic partner designation with the U.S., which would prioritize American interests in mining and infrastructure. But even in Accra, there's backlash brewing. Civil society organizations, especially student unions and anti-corruption watchdogs, are raising alarms. They see Trump's proposals as a slippery slope toward neo-imperial control. A wave of editorials, podcast segments, and youth influencers are calling for public hearings before any deal is signed. For Ghana, the threat isn't military, it's moral. Can you call yourself sovereign if your defense strategy comes in a FedEx envelope from Mar-a-Lago? So here we are, 5 African presidents, 1 memo, and a silent clock ticking behind the scenes of history. Trump didn't just summon African leaders for a handshake or a photo op. He pulled them into a new kind of war, one fought not with bullets or tanks, but with contracts, pressure, and leverage. A battle for influence, for resources, for the soul of a continent that has been told for centuries what to do, how to fight, and who to serve. But now that's shifting. You see, this isn't just a story about Trump. It's not even just about the United States. This is about whether Africa will keep playing a game where the rules are written elsewhere, or whether it will finally flip the board. The real reason behind Trump's move isn't just strategy. It's fear. Fear that Africa, with its booming youth, exploding markets, and critical minerals, is drifting out of America's control. And when an empire feels like it's losing its grip, it doesn't ask questions. It makes demands. But those 5 leaders, Tinubu, Faye, Akufo-Addo, Ruto, Tshisekedi, they now stand at a crossroads. One road leads to short-term deals, flashy investments, and new dependencies. The other is harder, slower, but sovereign. It requires saying no to the most powerful man in American politics and trusting in your people instead. What they choose next will shape not just Africa's future, but the entire balance of global power. So I want you to think about this. If 5 presidents are being pressured in secret, how many more will be next? And if Africa doesn't start writing its own script, someone else always will. If this video opened your eyes, don't just scroll away. Like this video, share it with someone who still believes Africa is weak, and drop your thoughts in the comments. And most importantly, subscribe if you want more stories like this. Stories that expose the truth, that challenge the narrative, and that remind you, Africa is not for sale. I'll see you in the next one.